So next up we have, again, we're going to welcome Stephen Ehlinger back, as well as Chelsea Toler, I believe is here, yeah. And then Bobby Kia, who we got to hear from earlier in the day, to talk about impact. You're good, not at all. Impact from the family office perspective. So this is welcome. This is again, so Forrest gave us some perspective on how to, think about change and choice, the choices we make. And so now I'll first invite you, and we'll let Bobby jump in if and when he's able to join. But I'll invite you first to introduce yourselves from the family office perspective for those that don't know you, and then we'll take things from there.
So I'm Chelsea Toler. I launched the foundation portion of our family office. And then I also share, I am a co-founder of a company with my partner and partner in life called Logic Tree. But in terms of, the concept of choice, that really hit me hard. Excited to bring the next gen perspective to this room, but also to understand that within this room, the choices that we make truly in the next 5 to 10 years will have an enormous impact on the world, whether that's technology, the planet, or your purpose. So grateful to be here.
Thank you. Yes, Stephen Ehlinger, and Forrest, I just want to thank you for your share. It really touched me a lot. And it's funny that I was managing director of the John Quincy Adams family office. And so your story about kind of, our founding as a country and some of those principles, really came full circle for me. And so, I echo your sentiment as well as the choices that we're making as a collective, really, but within family offices. And I shared that, this was a 4th generation family office that I was at, and how that intergenerational choice pattern, evolves. And it's I think with each generation, there's new insights that are available. And I'm into hearing that and listening deeply to what that's informing us. So thank you.
So you both obviously care, and you're, trying to actualize that in the world through different perspectives. Bobby, come join us, please. So we're just starting a conversation. If you weren't here this morning, Bobby spoke quite eloquently, I felt, about the work he's doing with Fulbright. But we just introduced ourselves, Chelsea and Stephen introduced themselves from family office perspective, and wanted to invite you to do the same before we kind of jump into a conversation.
Sure, thank you. For those who weren't here, my name is Bobby Kia, and we have a family office that my uncle started after selling EnviroCare of Utah, which is now called Energy Solutions. He sold it in 2005, and so we have a diversified multi-asset class, traditional family office with marketable securities, credit strategies, municipal bonds, and I focus on the private equity fund strategy, and specifically trying to use my network and expertise from the World Bank IFC to help us identify sustainable infrastructure and renewable energy and strategies that are more in line with where the economy is moving rather than where it's been so far. And we also have a family foundation. And so in that respect, I'm always looking for ways to apply blended finance techniques and leverage some of the models that we developed at IFC. But there's obviously traditional grant making that happens, and hopefully that's good.
So the theme of this panel is impact from family office perspective. How should family offices approach impact? It's I think not being from that world and just being kind of recently exposed. I think of something that those not in that world don't understand. And correct me if I'm wrong. It's a lot of the kind of responsibility of being in that world is around wise stewardship, right? And so, it sounds nice. Oh, just give everything you have to this one thing, but that's comes with, as Forrest spoke to briefly, quite a great risk. And so, I'd love to kind of start things with hearing more about what you see as some of the barriers in the family office world to focusing on impact.
I can start with that. I think, man, that last panel really hit, I guess, all of us hard. But one thing that was stated, and I think it really resonates with the question, is that we tend to put, and we even said this in your intro, and I did the same thing, we tend to put care and foundation over here and transaction and investment over here. When in reality, the future that I want to see is that care needs to come through everything that we do, right? So you'll hear you talk about, for-profit business, but I believe the future is next gens and many of my funds, like we're in funds, we're in community, we invest in things that make a return, but ultimately, how are we looking at how those things care about people, how those things care about the world, how those things care about ourselves and each other? So one massive barrier I would like to see, and I failed to mention this part, but I am a proud non-attorney of a very all-attorney family. But we run a patent law firm in Texas. But some of the things I hope to see in the future are evaluating different entity structures. I think now we're in a time of innovation in the world. Let's reimagine what care across different asset classes and across entities could look like.
Yeah, one of the themes that I've seen over the years is this drive for market rate returns plus impact, and that the risk models that allow impact capital placement into innovative designs and technologies is fraught with an extra hurdle because of that. And I think a lot of brilliant people have been trying to solve that for, I would say, more than 2 decades. And you mentioned, kind of a blended capital approach. And I think that gets back to Forrest's kind of community thinking, right? That there's many forms of capital, and it's not just the financial capital for profit thought or the foundation, caring thought. There's a blended capital space in which true innovative caring allows capital to flow where it's most needed. And what I'm noticing in the next gen communities that I'm connected to is that sensitivity is present. Now, how it's being articulated is still finding its voice, but I'm sensing that in the interactions that I'm having. Yeah.
I'll just add that I think another barrier that I've noticed is really exemplified in our CIO, actually, is ideology. And I think there's really a need for education that's truly transformative, pun intended. I mean, I think there's a need to really reach across the aisle, specifically to those who don't necessarily see the world that we want them to see. And so, there's been some examples like Capricorn's, help Jeff Skoll transform his way of asset allocation and asset management. But, I think we need more such templates and specifically such education opportunities for those that really are not just at the front front-footed, but even really on the sort of far end of the spectrum. We need to try to reach them because that's where a lot of the capital sits. So I'd be really, it's going to be, it has been, and it will continue to be really a lifelong battle to sort of get our team to see what I see, right? And so I think, any ideas around how do we cross those barriers through education?
I really appreciate that because, we talk about impact from family office perspective. There's almost like this, especially, well, who's the group here in the room? It's those who care. Thank you. It's those who are kind of already on that page, right? And so in a sense, we're at risk of preaching to the choir. And the question I think is really wisely brought in is, how do we reach those who are not seeing things this way, as though it's just a given that you should be doing good? And I think it was Alessa earlier who talked about translation. And we have to meet people where they are and understand that they actually do care about good, but they're looking at it from a different frame, as opposed to they don't care. They're just like, then we're making them the other, right? As opposed to, no, they have care, but they're looking at it in a specific context, certain paradigm. And so I think that's actually a very caring thing. If you can look at someone who sees things differently than you and see them as good, and ultimately they won't hear you until they feel recognized, right? So I think that's actually a really wise thing to bring in. Had we the time, I'd love to deep dive on that, and if anyone has any reflections on that specifically, I think that's really important.
Yeah, so I'm going to give a mini shout out to Bobby, who told me to be bold on this panel. So, Bobby on the right, this is me being bold on this panel. I don't think the people that care are caring enough. In my opinion, I worked at the UN for 6 years. No opinion one way or the other on UN, but was really there to try and drive more capital into youth. 6 years later, attended the Summit of the Future. Chris and I were there about wisdom and logic, and yet again, I heard them talk about the importance of investing in youth and investing in women and caring about the planet, and yet I did not see a single youth speaker. I think I saw one female country leader total out of the 60 that I sat in. So my offer to you is that it's a twofold problem. It's ideology that some people haven't even been reached to really understand what even is impact. And even if you know impact, how do you define that for yourself, but within your family? But in addition to that, for those of us that are on this page and we see what's coming and we see that we're entering a new technological era that will require discernment from our youth in a way like never before, and we see that we have these things affecting the climate that I don't care how much money you have, if we don't exist, it doesn't really matter now, does it? And to receive that, we need to care about youth and care about women in what I could describe all the things I saw within the UN, but I will spare you some of those stories in case they come up later. We're not doing enough. So caring is very, very, very critical and important. But transaction is also very, very, very important. And so I think the more that we can do in community and collaboratively to start to move the humanness of all of us, that's what I'm interested in being a part of.
Forgot to drop the mic.
No, Ruby. No, she did. No, she did. So this, this actually points to, I think, a reflection of what Bobby was saying, that, so we're in a room full of those who care, we'll say, and to, call us all in to caring more. I think that's a good thing to do. And now I think the challenge, and this is why I say it goes back to what Bobby's saying, because even if it's like, we take away the false dichotomy of this side of that and that kind of framing, it's like, okay, we all care. and yet we're not doing enough. Okay, and so now it's looking at, okay, meet us where we're at. Understand that we're trying. We don't know what to do. And in prep for today, Stephen, in one of the conversations, Alistair, who's a master weaver, had facilitated, Stephen talked about one thing he thinks is actually really important is for the family office space is to learn about new asset classes. Because, many people in the world have kind of an existential dread or are cynical about the state of the world. I've never felt that way because I have been spending a lot of time thinking about like, what should we actually do? And so if you did, but I understand people who look at things that way, because if you didn't think there was a thing we could do, yeah, look at everything we hear on the news. And so my question is, what can we do for those who do care, and what can we do to help them care better? And by care better, I don't mean just like the internal process, but actualize that in the world. What can we do to help them be more effective in ushering in the world we are sensing?
Yeah, I sense some of the forthcoming changes that are required for that caring to be visible, right? In collective action, right? Ultimately, those choices that are driven by that deep caring, have to result in action. And that does mean taking out the checkbook and and placing the capital, so to speak, right? Kind of metaphorically, but literally. And to allow new innovation to flourish and to come into being, even though it's a new asset class. We've never seen this before. We have no data points to suggest, because we like to say, past behavior predicts future performance, right? It's just like a classic mindset. And it's just like, what if there is no past behavior to measure? So then that's a perceived risk. And so the action doesn't take place, even though all the suggestion is that this new asset class actually could be a solution for the problems that we all know are very real. And so I see the education piece that Bobby brought up being that's the tip, but then the real spear is the action that comes out of that. Yeah.
Earlier, Jeff and Jed and Tim were talking about, you're looking at all these different investments. It's impactful because of this and this metric. And so the question is, how do you filter through the noise? Because you're talking about, there's actually something new that you don't have a frame of reference for, but it's also everyone who wants you to invest is shilling, basically selling that this is the thing. And so the question is, how do we discern?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I mean, yeah, and I think that is the question. I think you start with I think as Jed said, you start with this sense of, and as you said, you echoed, the sense of what is the passion, what is the need that you have as an investor. So in our case, our principal, coming from the space of, the nuclear revolution, effectively, and addressing the waste associated with nuclear production. That was the specific business that was created. And so we've tried arriving to his desk with, renewable energy opportunities because it made sense kind of intellectually. But actually, we found out that no, the area that gets him excited is specifically in the sub area of renewable energy, namely nuclear. And now within nuclear, in terms of discernment, we really need to double, triple click down and look at the full spectrum. You have what's available now. And so, because we're in the state of Utah, the state is super friendly to nuclear. And so we're looking at specific project assets in the state that we can support. But then there's, for for example, using the foundation to invest in researchers, world-class researchers, to obviously look at the 10, 15-year horizon for what nuclear's capability is. And so I think we've just found that you need to be a little bit more precise with understanding the needs of the investor, and then to your point, trying to empower them with the optionality empower them through a really objective and comprehensive survey of what's out there. And that's hard to find, that's really hard to find.
I think a few things. So this is for me and Chris, but the way that we move from or gain discernment is through logic, right? So we look and break down what are the questions that are necessary to be asked. And then based on, asking the right questions, you can get closer to the decision-making process. So one area I would say that we do a lot is we're working on logic due diligence. So logic-based actually due diligence. So that's something I'm really excited about and happy to talk to anyone that's interested in that. The second thing, back to the last panel again, that I think was really relevant is we're designed to make decisions as a community. And yet a lot of the structures that we've put around the family office space are the opposite. So we're trying to navigate some of the unprecedented times in the world, but on our own. So I'll tell you some things I'm seeing that I'm afraid of. A lot of capital is going into AI. I'm going to say that again. A lot of capital is going into AI, but not collaboratively very well. Different families are trying to build their own things, and they're not really thinking about how it impacts as an ecosystem. And sure, some are. I'm not calling out any one family. Same thing on climate. A lot of capital is actually going into climate, but are they going into the right things, right? So it's not actually that we don't care, and it's not that we're not moving capital. Some of us are, but we're not doing it collaboratively in community. And I think it's done a really good job of this, and I hope to see this more. And that is, Bobby or Stephen or anybody in this room, how can we not just look at optimizing for profitability, but how do we optimize for humanity and the planet and with our interests and with our gifts in mind? But we need to be coming to the table as a collective. Family offices are a community. We don't only need advisors. Those are great. Those are helpful. But we also need to come together with those that have the majority of the capital right now to figure out what to do. So that's how I would hope to see decision-making happen.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I guess I would just add, I sense there part of that collaboration or within family offices, and I know there's some people from Energen family here. There's this how do the investment theses, the mandates within a particular office, how do those compare to other offices? How is there joint investment made into something that there's agreement across that entire field, right? And so I think what's really needed is for this new data, this new depth of caring to start to inform those investment theses, and then for the family offices to convene on a regular basis to share those insights and to grow their own decision tree, their logic tree, right? As you're doing. Yeah.
That brings, like something Chelsea said is, we are deploying capital. The real question is what we, and I think what she's pointing to is the we of like our family to our community. And so the question is, how do we foster that? And we didn't get into it. Forrest obviously has been thinking about these things for a long time and has developed a tool Corey facilitated at the Energen session in January using similar principles, and it was so beautifully done. And so if you weren't here, as we've mentioned it throughout the day, part of Transformative Ventures' plan is to not have this be an event, oh, it's so amazing, and then we go back to our regular lives tomorrow, but to foster community by having regular calls with a dynamic I won't get into now, but perhaps I'm seeing that there's actually a need for not just bringing investors together writ large, whether it's on a certain thesis, but specifically families and families. Perhaps with an EGP frame, Forrest developed a methodology called ephemeral group process for solving for some of the problems of making decisions together, such as the loudest voice in the room gets the most tension, the most charismatic voice in the room gets the most tension. And when I'm putting out an idea and Bobby puts out a competing idea, all of a sudden we're not looking from the same side of the table. And so he's developed such a beautiful methodology that perhaps will independent of the calls we've already got planned, foster something for the family office communities to become more interconnected, because as we've talked about all day, this weaving, it's that interstitial, like none of today would not have happened without David and Sophia and Alistair and Florian, who made, like, if you're here because someone introduced you meet someone amazing here, that connection is awesome, but ultimately none of that would have happened without that invisible web weaver. And so there's a really important role, and we're seeing, as Forrest points to, like, we will not survive if we do not get better at making decisions together. And the foundation of that is being together. And so there's a need for togethering, and that is a role. So went over. Thank you, everyone. Really lovely.